Was it really just bad luck? Or did McLaren just go into crisis without anyone wanting to admit it? Because what happened in China is not normal. 2 cars, 2 different failures, and a team that had just dominated Formula 1 disappearing without even being able to compete. Something that, internally, has set off all the alarms. And this is where the Real bomb comes in. Because while many thought that Zak Brown was going to go out to protect Lando Norris and Oscar Piastri, what he did was very different. He sent a harsh, cold, and pressure-filled message. A message that does not point directly to the drivers, but that makes it clear that at McLaren there is no longer any room for error. Because when a champion team starts like this, what is at stake is not a race, it is the entire season. And now the big question is, what happened at the Chinese Grand Prix with McLaren was not simply a bad result. It was a completely out of control scenario that left the team in a position that was as uncomfortable as it was worrying from every possible angle. Because it all started before the race even started. Lando Norris couldn't even leave the garage. An electrical problem detected in the previous preparation left him completely out of action before competing, an already alarming situation for a team that came with high aspirations. But the really shocking thing came later. When Oscar Piastri, who had managed to make it to the grid, had to abandon before starting the race due to another completely different failure in the same critical system of the car. And this is where everything becomes much more serious. Because McLaren did not suffer a single problem replicated in both cars, it suffered 2 independent failures at the same time, something that within the team itself was described as an extremely unfortunate coincidence, but which at the same time opens a much deeper question. How is it possible for 2 systems to fail differently at the same critical moment? This completely changes the narrative. We are no longer talking about a specific error, but rather a possible structural weakness in the power package, forcing the team to initiate an urgent investigation together with Mercedes HPP to understand what went wrong and, above all, prevent it from happening again. But beyond the technical problem, what really shakes McLaren is the context in which all this happens. This team is not just anyone. It comes from being a reference, from having one of the most competitive cars, from fighting at the top. And now, in one of the first key events on the calendar, it simply disappears without adding a single competitive lap. And this is where the message from above begins to make sense. Because when a team of this level fails in this way, it is no longer just about fixing a car. It is about responding to enormous internal pressure, of justifying a start to the season that is far below expectations. Because although Norris and Piastri are not publicly pointed out directly, the reality is that the bar at McLaren has changed. And what happened in China is not only a technical problem, it is a turning point that forces the entire team, including its drivers, to react immediately if they do not want this story to become much more complicated than it already seems. But if there is something that really heightens the severity of all this, it is not only what happened on the track but what is happening inside McLaren after the disaster. Because while outside they tried to maintain a controlled discourse, inside the situation is very different. Zak Brown sends a clear message of regrouping, but that message, although it does not point directly to Lando Norris or Oscar Piastri, does establish something much more important. The demand has risen, and there is no room to repeat a mistake like this. And this connects to an even bigger problem, the real state of the car. Because the MCL39 is not a failed car, but it is not that dominant car that many expected to see after the recent success. McLaren acknowledges that they are still in the learning phase with this new package, that they need to better understand how to extract performance from the power unit, and that there are key areas such as cornering grip, where they are not yet at the expected level. This is key, because it completely changes the reading of what happened in China. It is no longer just an isolated electrical failure. It is a team that still does not fully understand its own car, that does not have immediate solutions ready, and that also confirms that the big improvements will take several more races to arrive. McLaren didn't just fail. McLaren doesn't have a quick fix. And this is where the pressure really starts to grow. Because when a champion team enters a phase of technical doubts, every mistake weighs twice as much, every abandonment is magnified, and every message from above stops being motivational and becomes a warning. That is why Zak Brown's words are not a coincidence. They are a way of marking territory, of reminding the entire team, including its drivers, that this is not acceptable, and that the reaction has to be immediate. Because if China has made one thing clear, it's that McLaren is not as solid as it seemed, and that if they don't correct course now, the problem could escalate much faster than anyone within the team is willing to admit. And this is where everything explodes. Because after what happened in China, McLaren can no longer hide behind bad luck. Now he has to show who he really is this season. Because the next step is not just Suzuka, it is a direct test of character. The team arrives with a dangerous mix. moral blow, technical urgency, and accumulated internal pressure. It is no longer just about repairing an electrical fault. It is about regaining confidence in the car, in the processes, and in themselves as a competitive structure. And here appears the most critical point of all. Because when a team recognizes that it needs several races to bring important improvements, what it is really saying is that it does not have immediate tools to reverse the situation. That leaves Norris and Piastri in a very delicate position, because they are going to have to compete with a car that is not yet optimized, under much greater pressure, and with a clear message from above: we must respond now. And this completely changes the panorama. Because if McLaren fails again, it will no longer be seen as an accident, it will be the start of a trend. And in Formula One, when a negative trend appears, it is extremely difficult to stop it. That's why Zak Brown's story weighs so much. Because it wasn't a simple speech, it was a line marked on the ground. A line that separates two very clear scenarios. Or McLaren reacts immediately and becomes that dominant team again. Or this start of the season becomes the beginning of a much deeper fall. And the big unknown right now is not whether the car is fast. It is whether the team is prepared to withstand the pressure that is coming. Because China not only left a double abandonment, he left a doubt. And in Formula One, when doubts appear, everything can collapse much faster than it seems. A warning that even the teams that seem most solid can falter. That past success guarantees absolutely nothing in a Formula One that does not forgive mistakes. And above all, that McLaren is entering a phase where every detail counts more than ever. Because what this weekend left was not only an electrical problem, it was a total exposure of the team's current weaknesses. A car that they still do not understand 100%, a lack of immediate solutions, and an internal pressure that has already begun to escalate. And in the middle of all that, Zak Brown's message, a message that does not point out directly, but that makes it clear that this level is not enough, that there are no excuses here, and that both the team and its drivers have to respond. Because Norris and Piastri are no longer just competing against the rest of the grid, now they are also competing against the expectations of a team that wants to remain at the top, and that is not willing to tolerate another blow like the one in China. The big question now is not what went wrong, it's what's going to happen next. Because if McLaren manages to react, this moment will remain as a simple stumble on the road. But if you don't, China will be remembered as the beginning of something much bigger. Because now McLaren enters a much more dangerous phase. The phase where it is no longer about understanding what happened, but about showing that they can prevent it from happening again. The problem is that these types of situations leave consequences, and not just technical ones. Within the team, each engineer now works with added pressure. Each decision becomes questioned, and each small failure begins to generate doubts in a structure that, until very recently, functioned practically without cracks. What happened in China breaks that inertia. It breaks that internal confidence that is key in a championship team. And this directly affects the pilots. Because Lando Norris and Oscar Piastri not only lost a race, they lost something much more important. Continuity, competitive pace, and above all, margin for error in a championship that waits for no one. While other teams add, evolve, and consolidate results, McLaren has been forced to stop, to rethink, to rebuild from within. And here another key factor appears: time. Because we already know that the improvements will not come immediately, which means that the next races will not be about dominance, they will be about survival. And in that context, each weekend becomes a psychological test for both the drivers and the team. Because when you know that you don't have the perfect car, but you still have to perform, that's where the good ones really separate from those who can sustain a winning project. And this is where Zak Brown's message makes even more sense. It was not just a reaction to abandonment, it was a way of preparing the team for what is coming. An uncomfortable, demanding stage where talent is not enough, where resilience, precision, and an immediate response at all levels is needed. Because McLaren is no longer in dominance mode, it's in rebuild mode. And the difference between the great teams and the rest is exactly what they do in moments like this. Let me know in the comments what you think about all this.